9.3b. Putting it together. Make your research more effective. If you begin your research with only a general topic in mind, you run the risk of spending hours reading mountains of excellent literature about your topic. However, mountains of literature do not always make coherent speeches. You may have little or no idea of how to tie your research all together, or even whether you should tie it together. If, on the other hand, you conduct your research with a clear thesis statement in mind, you will be better able to zero in only on material that directly relates to your chosen thesis statement. Let's look at an example that illustrates this point. Many traffic accidents involve drivers older than 55. While this statement may be true, you could find industrial, medical, insurance literature that can drone on ad infinitum about the details of all such accidents in just 1 year. Instead, focusing your thesis statement will help you narrow the scope of your information you will be searching for while gathering information. Here's an example of a more focused thesis statement. 3 factors contribute to most accidents involving drivers over 55 years of age: failing eyesight, slower reflexes, and rapidly changing traffic conditions. This framing is somewhat better. This thesis statement at least provides 3 possible main points and some keywords for your electronic catalog search. However, if you want your audience to understand the context of older people at the wheel, consider something like this. Mature drivers over 55 years of age must cope with more challenging driving conditions than existed only 1 generation ago. More traffic moving at higher speeds, the increased imperative for quick driving decisions, and rapidly changing ramp and cloverleaf systems. Because of these challenges, I want my audience to believe that drivers over the age of 65 should be required to pass a driving test every 5 years. This framing of the thesis provides some interesting choices. First, several terms need to be defined, and these definitions might function surprisingly well in setting the tone of the speech. Your definitions of words like generation, quick driving decisions, and cloverleaf systems could jolt your audience out of assumptions they have taken for granted as truth. Second, the framing of the thesis provides you with a way to describe the specific changes as they have occurred between, say, 1970 and 2010. How much and in what ways have the volume and speed of traffic changed? Why are quick decisions more critical now? What's a cloverleaf, and how does any driver deal cognitively with exiting in the direction seemingly opposite to the desired one? Questions like this, suggested by your own thesis statement, can lead to a strong, memorable speech. Enhance your delivery. When your thesis is not clear to you, your listeners will be even more clueless than you are. But if you have a good, clear thesis statement, your speech becomes clear to your listeners. When you stand in front of your audience presenting your introduction, you can vocally emphasize the essence of your speech, expressed as your thesis statement. Many speakers pause for a half-second, lower their vocal pitch slightly, and slow down a little, and deliberately present the thesis statement, the one sentence that encapsulates its purpose. When this is done effectively, the purpose, intent, or main idea of a speech is driven home for an audience. How to write a thesis statement. Now that we've looked at why a thesis statement is crucial in a speech, let's switch gears and talk about how we go about writing a solid thesis statement. A thesis statement is related to the general and specific purposes of a speech as we discussed in Chapter 6. Choose your topic. The first step in writing a good thesis statement was originally discussed in Chapter 6, when we discussed how to find topics. Once you have a general topic, you are ready to go to the second step of creating a thesis statement. Narrow your topic. One of the hardest parts of writing a thesis statement is narrowing a speech from a broad topic to one that can easily be covered during a 5 to 10 minute speech. While 5 to 10 minutes may sound like a long time to new public speakers, the time flies by very quickly when you're speaking. You can easily run out of time if your topic is too broad. To ascertain if your topic is narrow enough for a specific time frame, ask yourself 3 questions. First, is your thesis statement narrow, or is it a broad overgeneralization of a topic? An overgeneralization occurs when we classify everyone in a specific group as having a specific characteristic. For example, a speaker's thesis statement that all members of the National Council of La Raza are militant is an overgeneralization of all members of the organization. Furthermore, a speaker would have to correctly demonstrate that all members of the organization are militant for the thesis statement to be proven, which is a very difficult task since the National Council of La Raza consists of millions of Hispanic Americans. A more appropriate thesis related to this topic could be, since the creation of the National Council of La Raza in 1968, the NCLR has become increasingly militant in addressing the causes of Hispanics in the United States. The second question to ask yourself when narrowing a topic is whether your speech's topic is one clear topic or multiple topics. A strong thesis statement consists of only a single topic. The following is an example of a thesis statement that contains too many topics. Medical marijuana, prostitution, and gay marriage should all be legalized in the United States. Not only are all three fairly broad topics, but you also have three completely unrelated topics thrown into a single thesis statement. Instead of a thesis statement that has multiple topics, limit yourself to only one topic. Here's an example of a thesis statement examining only one topic. Today, we are going to examine the legalization and regulation of the oldest profession in the state of Nevada. In this case, we're focusing our topic on how one state has handled the legalization and regulation of prostitution. The last question a speaker should ask when making sure a topic is sufficiently narrow is whether the topic has direction. If your basic topic is too broad, you will never have a solid thesis statement or a coherent speech. For example, if you start off with the topic, Barack Obama is a role model for everyone. What do you mean by this statement? Do you think President Obama is a role model because of his dedication to civic service? Do you think he's a role model because he's a good basketball player? Do you think he's a good role model because he's an excellent public speaker? When your topic is too broad, almost anything can become part of that topic. This ultimately leads to a lack of direction and coherence within the speech itself. To make a cleaner topic, a speaker needs to narrow his or her topic to one specific area. For example, you may want to examine why President Obama is a good speaker. Put your topic into a sentence. Once you have narrowed your topic to something that is reasonably manageable given the constraints placed on your speech, you can then formalize that topic as a complete sentence. For example, you could turn the topic of President Obama's public speaking skills into the following sentence. Because of his unique sense of lyricism and his well-developed presentational skills, President Barack Obama is a modern symbol of the power of public speaking. Once you have a clear topic sentence, you can start tweaking the thesis statement to help set up the purpose of your speech. Add your argument, viewpoint, or opinion. This function only applies if you are giving a speech to persuade. If your topic is informative, your job is to make sure the thesis statement is non-argumentative and focuses on the facts. For example, in the preceding thesis statement, we have a couple of opinion-oriented terms that should be avoided for informative speeches. Unique sense, well-developed, and power. All three of these terms are laced with an individual's opinion, which is fine for a persuasive speech, but not for an informative speech. For informative speeches, the goal of a thesis statement is to explain what the speech will be informing the audience is about, not attempting to add the speaker's own opinion about the speech's topic. For an informative speech, you could rewrite the thesis statement to read, "This speech is going to analyze Barack Obama's use of lyricism in his speeches." On the other hand, if your topic is persuasive, you want to make sure that your argument, viewpoint, or opinion is clearly indicated within the thesis statement. If you're going to argue that Barack Obama is a great speaker, then you should set up this argument within your thesis statement. Use the thesis checklist. Once you have written a first draft of your thesis statement, you're probably going to end up revising your thesis statement a number of times prior to delivering your actual speech. A thesis statement is something that is constantly tweaked until the speech is given. As your speech develops, often your thesis will need to be rewritten to whatever direction the speech has taken. We often start with the speech going in one direction and find out through our research that we should have gone a different direction. When you think you finally have a thesis statement that is good to go for your speech, take a second and make sure it adheres to the criteria in the table in your book. This is Table 9.1, the Thesis Checklist. Does your thesis clearly reflect the topic of your speech? Can you adequately cover the topic indicated in your thesis within the time you have for your speech? Is your thesis statement simple? Is your thesis statement direct? Does your thesis statement gain an audience's interest? Is your thesis statement easy to understand? For persuasive speeches, does your thesis statement introduce a clear argument? Does your thesis statement clearly indicate what your audience should do, how your audience should think, or how your audience should feel? Preview of speech. The final part of an introduction contains a preview of the major points to be covered within your speech. I'm sure we've all seen signs that have 3 cities listed on them with the mileage to reach each city. This mileage sign is an indication of what's to come. A preview works in the same way. A preview foreshadows what the main body points will be in the speech. For example, to preview a speech on bullying in the workplace, one could say, "To understand the nature of bullying in the modern workplace, I will first define what workplace bullying is and the types of bullying. I will then discuss the common characteristics of both workplace bullies and their targets. And lastly, I will explore some possible solutions to workplace bullying." In this case, each of the phrases mentioned in the preview would be a single distinct point made in the speech itself. In other words, the first major body point in the speech would examine what workplace bullying is and the types of bullying. The second major body point in this speech would discuss common characteristics of both workplace bullies and their targets. And lastly, the third body point in this speech would explore some possible solutions to workplace bullying.